It is my privilege and pleasure on behalf of the UJ Library to welcome you all to the second day of our first virtual teacher librarian webinar. We are honored to be joined by our Executive Director, Prof. Maria from ARP, our guest speakers, Dr. Lorette Jacobs, Mr. Bilal Kathrada, Dr. Graham Dampier, and Dr. Jacqueline Bachela. Our next speaker is Dr. Graham Dampier. He is the head of the Department of Academic Literacies at the University of Johannesburg. The title of his talk is titled Organising Knowledge, Steps to Creating a Second Brain. Dr. Graham Dampier is the head of the Department of Academic Literacies. He holds a PhD in English literature and has a variety of research interests, from Karl Marx critique to capitalism to the poetry of W.B. Yeats. Dr. Graham Dampier, over to you.
Right, thank you so much for that, Ivy. And also thank you for the invitation to speak here and to share some of the interesting technologies I'm using when I read and write and try and synthesize information into research that can be meaningful. And it's something that I'm just getting started out with. In fact, I've learned this during those long hours of the lockdown where I had nothing better to do than learn something new. And to that end, I'm going to share my screen with all of you because I would like to show you a variety of tools, beginning with a couple of websites, as well as apps that I think are useful for both reading and writing. And I begin with perhaps the most important website available on the internet, which is Goodreads.com. It's a free website that allows people to research books that they're interested in reading, as well as to read reviews on those books, and to get a lot of information that they may think are useful. So one of the things I am interested in, as you've indicated in your introduction, Ivy, is that I'm interested essentially in economics and the way in which nations all over the world consider economic issues when they set up their systems, whether or not they be inclusive or not. And one of the books I'm reading at the moment is a book called Why Nations Fail, written by a Turkish and American economists. And essentially the book is a book that tries to explain why certain nations prosper economically while others struggle, and they use a particular theory to unpack that idea. The nice thing about Goodreads is that it does give you access to the book in various online resources. There's a link to libraries. So if you are interested in obviously accessing this book at a library, you could always go there, but I'm assuming it will probably route you to an American library. I've never actually tried that. There are also online bookstores that sell this book, and all the bookstores that you can buy this book from, as well as Amazon, which is my preferred online bookstore. And the reason why it's my preferred online bookstore is because I use something or a device that I think is probably the most important device for readers since the invention of the printing press back in the 15th century. The nice thing about Goodreads, and that is a Kindle, by the way, the nice thing about Goodreads is that it does find lists that the book you are reading have been included in, so that you can see which books are more or less similar to one another based on theme, based on style, based on genre, and people often vote for these books. So, for example, if we look at this Best Books to Frame Thinking, there's 1,009 books in there, and over 1,400 people have voted for these books, and they rank them from first to last based on the number of people who voted for them. So this is nice if you're interested in a particular field of study or a particular area that you want to read into, and it gives you a nice, I'd say, a nice spread of books based on their popularity within the general reading public. And if you are interested in reading a book, let's say this one, all you need to do is say, I want to read this, and it then is included in your books, your to read books, right? Want to read. currently reading books are books that you might, or that I have started reading recently, and you'll see that Why Nations Fail is one of them. I'm going to go back there. So it's very important, I think, when starting out with a new area of research, to look for books that are quite important within that field and to read as many of them as possible. I'm a voracious reader. The nice thing about Goodreads is that it does also allow you to track your the books you've read over the past year in some way. So you are able at the beginning of each year to set a reading challenge for yourself. And this year I said to myself, I'm going to read 55 books, and thus far I've already completed 92. It's been the most prolific year of reading for me thus far, and it's not only down to the lockdown, although I think the lockdown has a big part to play. So that's it for Goodreads. And then obviously Amazon.com is a very important website for not only finding books, but also buying books. And as I said, I prefer to use the Kindle. And the Kindle app is an app that you can download for free onto your computer. However, you would have to buy the books if you're going to do so via Amazon. To give you a sense of how the Kindle app works, I actually want to look at this book that I just showed you now, Why Nations Fail. The Kindle app does sync across multiple devices, from your cell phone to a Kindle if you own one, as well as a desktop app like the one that I have open right now. Apologies, it's just busy downloading the book. It should open soon, and then I will show you more or less what you can do when you're inside. So this is what the reading interface looks like in Kindle. Most of you, I'm sure, are aware of it. And one of the things you can do when you're reading on a Kindle is actually highlight text that you find interesting and that you would like to look at later. And the reason why this is important is because I'm going to show you a way to actually take all the highlights you have committed to any text you've read on Kindle and to centralize all of those highlights within one application that you are then able to use to not only look at those highlights again, but also to comment on them. Because the important thing I think about reading is to read actively and for meaning. And I think it's probably a good idea to discuss that a bit later on as well. So to give you a sense, whenever I read, I will look at a piece of text, I will simply scroll over it and then choose which color I want to highlight it in. And if I want to add a note, I can. There's also a dictionary built into the application that allows you to define specific words. So let's look at economic, for example. You can find a dictionary definition for that as well. So the nice thing, and I think this does remind me a lot of what Bilal was saying earlier on about the Internet of Things and the way in which the fourth industrial revolution is reshaping the way we are going to relate not only to the world, but to one another, but also specifically when it comes to knowledge. So the next tool I would like to show you, or the next website, is a website called, and I can't actually see it now because of Zoom, is a website called Readwise. It's actually an app as well that you can download onto your phone, and it allows you to do all sorts of interesting things. The most important thing it allows you to do is to export all of your notes. It connects to your Kindle, for example, and imports all the books and all the highlights you've made on those books, and allows you then to export that into 3 different applications: Roam Research, Notion, as well as Evernote. Until recently, I was a big Evernote user. I would use it every single day because it also syncs across multiple devices. But I've recently started using this application, Notion, because it allows you to do so much more and in very, very interesting ways. So about a week ago, I exported all of my highlights from all of the books I've ever read on Kindle to Notion. And this is all of them. And these are, I mean, bear in mind that I don't read all of my books on Kindle. I own over probably 500-600 books, just because I'm obsessive when it comes to collecting those sorts of things. But it does give me links to, or basically rather, it centralizes all of the notes or highlights I have ever made on Kindle for the past 10 years, which is when I started using it. So there are many books here, close to, I would say, about 50 to 80. If we look at Why Nations Fail, you will see that what it has done is it has not only given me a link to the URL on Amazon where I can find the book if I want to see more about it, but it also tells me how many highlights I've made in the book so far, and thus far I've made 24. And it also shows you, it gives you the highlight as well as specifies the location where that highlight occurred, which I find quite interesting because, again, it does allow me quite powerfully, I think, to look at what I've read in the past and to try and synthesize it in a way that's meaningful. Because I think just reading on its own can become quite a passive activity if one doesn't write about it afterwards. And to that end, I want to recommend perhaps anybody who's listening today a book that I think is very important when it comes to developing a system of note-taking that is not only productive but also highly efficient and that allows you to centralize knowledge in ways that are quite interesting, and I'll get to that now. So the book is How to Take Smart Notes, written by, I think he's a Swedish academic by the name of Sonka Arens. And he basically unpacks a note-taking system that was pioneered by a German sociologist by the name of Nicholas Lerman, who actually studied law and decided one day just to do a PhD in sociology, and he had to write a thesis in a short space of time. I think he had a year. And he developed a note-taking system that allowed him to not only complete his PhD within that year, but also to publish from it. And in the 38 years of his career, I think he published over 40 books or something like that, or 38 books in 35 years as an academic, which is very prolific. I mean, I think some of the best and most prolific writers in the world don't get to that sort of number within their career. And what he pioneered was a system of note-taking that is referred to in German as Zettelkasten, which essentially means slip box. And what this academic would do is he would read a book and he would have an index card next to him. And every single time he read something from a book that he found interesting, he would write a note that would remind him of a thought, or that would try and clarify how a specific person's thinking related to his own. And he would then index that using a very specific system to ultimately facilitate the collectivization of some of his notes within a conceptual structure. So I would definitely recommend How to Take Smart Notes as a book for, I suppose, a librarian who wants to engage with students on their reading, but also specifically on their writing about what they've read. Because I think that's something that is crucial in our higher as well as basic education sectors that I think is overlooked, and that is writing about what is being read. I think that it is perhaps the most important tool we can acquire in this changing time. So, for example, I think that if we don't know how to write effectively, we don't know how to think effectively. Because writing, in a sense, is thinking embodied in word and in some other tangible form that is then shared with other people, hopefully, in order to make sense of what was read. So I would definitely encourage librarians to instill and inculcate the need for active reading within their student population, and the best way to be an active reader is to take notes about what it is you are reading. And then the next resource I would like to share, if I can see it. All right, I'm actually going to show you what I do once I have taken down a note from a book. So what you're looking at the moment, is an application called Obsidian. It is free and it is available online. I think it's from obsidian.com. I'm not sure what the website is. And it is a very interesting note-taking application that allows you to centralize your thinking into structural nodes that can be used meaningfully, I think, when you are trying to summarize or write more productively about what it is you have read. So in front of you is essentially a map, a kind of interactive map of everything I have read on a very specific writer. And in fact, all of these little dots are concepts that I've linked together using the markdown language capabilities of this application, which I will illustrate to you in a moment. And it essentially allows me to figure out how some of these ideas are related to one another. And the three books that I have written about here are essentially the following three. Two books by the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who writes a book called The Twilight of the Idols and the Antichrist. He was a moral philosopher against Christian morality as a way to structure a modern way of living. And he was very scathing in his critique of Christian morality, not that I'm taking his side. And then he writes another book called The Genealogy of Morals. And then I've also included some notes from a biography written on him by a lady called Susan Perdue, I Am Dynamite, A Life of Friedrich Nietzsche, which I must say is a riveting read if any of you are interested. So when I read the books that I've just mentioned on Nietzsche, I would highlight a text because it's my own. I like to write in my books, and often that will require sometimes underlying text, but mostly just taking a paragraph or a piece of text, bracketing it off, and then writing Zettel with a number next to it so that I know that I need to write a note about that later on. And I'm going to show you what one of these notes look like. And I'll explain to you what the function of some of what you are seeing here is. So, for example, I write here that on the notion of progress, Nietzsche argues that the problem is not what must succeed mankind in the development of the species, but with what type of human being needs to be produced to warrant the level of progress. And you will see that progress has double square brackets next to it. And those double square brackets are based on markdown language, which ultimately allows us to connect the terms together. So, for example, if we look at the word modern, it does connect to other words in all sorts of interesting ways. And you will see later on that I provide the reference, which is not only the year and the author that published the book, but also the pages where a verbatim quote exists within the book, which is also referred to as a citation here. And if we go to the citation, you will see that I've indicated to myself that I need to include a recording of the extract. Normally, I either record extracts by reading them out, or I actually write them in, typing them word for word. So to give you a sense of what that looks like, here's an example of one, where Nietzsche unpacks his conception of freedom. Now, to get back to the initial map that I showed you, if you look at this, you will see that some orbs or spheres or circles are bigger than others, and that is because those links contain a lot more information than others. So just by hovering my mouse over the word moral, I can see all the places in which I have referenced that word and linked it so that I can create some other map for myself of where to go and look for that term in Nietzsche's writings, but also in my writing about Nietzsche. You will see that that specific source, the book that I've written about the most so far with Nietzsche, is the next most used link, and then Christian is the other one. So I want to look at the word moral. When I click on that, you will see only this little definition. But the important thing about this app is that it does allow you to look at all of the notes that have the word moral within them, and to get a sense of how that word is used in context. So if I scroll up a bit, let me look at, say, this one. No. Let's look at this one. We've got it, they cry in delight. It is the sense, it is the senses, these senses, which are so immoral as well. And if you click on that, it takes you to the actual note, which then allows you to start writing about this in interesting ways. I thought I would share this with all of you because it is something that I find quite interesting. It's something that I'm very passionate about, and it's something that I think is going to allow us to cope better with the oncoming fourth industrial revolution, because it does create that structure for ourselves. And you will note from my title, the title of my talk, that I speak about steps toward creating a second brain. And this is essentially what the brain is, this map of concepts on literally one person's thinking. And there's a lot there. There's a lot of content that one could draw on if one wants to write prolifically about or extensively about Nietzsche's moral theory, for example. It's all there more or less. Or if one wants to write about a particular concept or about a particular work as well. And then I wanted to show you two more resources that I think are absolutely essential for language writing or composition. TED-Ed, I'm sure that most of you as librarians will know of this website. I think TED-Ed is the most useful and effective way to learn how to write and read on the internet today, apart from YouTube, because it provides you with a lot of interesting videos on very specific topics that can be quite illustrative. So, for example, if you want to know what hyperbole is, there's a video here that unpacks it for you, and that also provides you with a list of resources that you can consult afterwards if you want to deepen your knowledge. I want to show you at least one. I'm not going to play the video, but I want to show you what it looks like when you explore it a bit further. Let's look at these colleagues. Let's look at me, myself, and I. When to use it. When you click on the video, you will see that there is a video that you can watch, but there's also something like a link called Think, which assesses whether or not a person has understood more or less what has been explained in the video. But then there's also this thing called, this link, Dig Deeper, which provides you with all sorts of useful resources that can be used to enhance not only your knowledge of how to use this, but perhaps even to explain this to students in a way that is more up their alley, hopefully. So I would definitely make use of TED-Ed just as a very useful pedagogical tool for language teaching and language learning. And then lastly, I want to show you, although I'm not going to go into it, maybe I should, a piece of software that has taken the world by storm, and it is Grammarly. And it is one that many people view as being almost the panacea for all of the writing issues that we currently have. And it's one that I would like to express caution towards. I have used Grammarly for years. And in fact, I stopped using it because I felt like it wasn't giving me what I needed from it. And the reason is simply that, firstly, Grammarly is, in a sense, a grammar checker, in the same way that Word has a grammar check or a spell check built into it. Grammarly has its own. And it is a useful resource in that it does provide you with interesting insights into your own writing. And it also does provide you with a lot of suggestions for how to correct your writing. But in my mind, it is something that we need to be very careful of when we use it. For the simple reason that I think that if we outsource the task of writing to computers, we won't be developing efficient ways of thinking through writing. Because I think that thinking through writing is one of the most important skills that anybody who aims to be a lifelong learner needs to have. If a person doesn't write every day, they'll never be a good writer. It's the bottom line. And the only way to become a good writer, yes, it's to write every day, but also to learn from others. And by that I mean to read as intensely and as variedly as one can, and to adopt the style of good writers as much as possible. That's something that I like to do when I write, both academically, but also creatively. It is to look at a writer, to find what's nice and interesting about the way they write, not what they write, the way they write, and to try and adopt that when I write as well. So Grammarly is interesting and it is very powerful. It does allow you, if you have a full subscription to Grammarly, to also check for plagiarism, and all sorts of very interesting things as well. But it's not something I use anymore. In fact, I haven't used it for years because I just don't get anything from it. It's nothing beneficial to me. And with that, I suppose I have nothing more to say, Ivy. I see you already over there. So that means my time is up, I hope.
Thank you very much for taking us through the various resources that you were sharing with us. I think that they are fantastic resources, and I will certainly be visiting some of the sites you were sharing with us. The book recommendation, How to Make Smart Notes, is much appreciated as well. Thank you very much.
The University of Johannesburg, the future reimagined.